Jesus didn't have a problem with people that's in the streets. He had a problem with religious people.
How can I help anybody when when I was not even able to help my own son?
I would never do that. I would never do that. And I became that in a matter of minutes when they took my pain pills away.
And I said, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.
This is Faith in Your Recovery. I am Randy Davis. Welcome to the battle. Once again, we thank you for joining us here at Faith in Your Recovery. I believe with all my heart we've got a special episode for you today. I look forward to getting to know our guest better, to hear his story. I know he comes from a background of, he's in long-term addiction recovery. He's an author. He's a pastor, involved in the Lutheran church. We're going to hear more about that here in a little bit. But he's also got we have learned through our office with our reading of one of his books and receiving the newsletter he sends out, he likes to talk about the elephant in the room, and I look forward to hearing about that. I think most of us can tell from the context what that elephant is, but I want to hear his name today. We don't always want to mention that. So we look forward to sharing this with you. Welcome, Pastor Ed Treat. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Randy. I'm delighted to be here. It's quite an honor.
Well, it's an honor to us as well. I read your credentials, your experiences. We want to get bits and pieces of all that. I know in 45 minutes we can't cover a lifetime of what you've been involved with, but we want to get as much of it as we can. So we look forward to this as well. Tell us about your background. What did Pastor Ed's life look like before he became Pastor Ed? Maybe that's a good place to start.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a big family. My parents had 8 kids, and I was number 6. And so we were an Army family. My family moved. My mom said we moved 32 times in 20 years.
Whoa.
And so we were all over the place. And Dad was in Vietnam or in Korea, and then in Vietnam. And so Mom was raising these 8 kids by herself for the most part. So it was a little chaotic, to say the least. My parents didn't drink. They drank a little, but not very often and not very much when they did. So it wasn't an alcoholic home, but my dad grew up in such an alcoholic home that we would say today that he was an untreated adult child of an alcoholic. And so his behavior was very much like an alcoholic. And so we never knew what we were going to get with him. He was as unpredictable as any drunk. One day he'd come home handing out candy, and the next day he'd be swinging a belt. And we would get whipped for the simplest reasons. It just depended on his mood. So I lived with a constant fear of punishment. And then my dad was very critical and judgmental of us, and he was always pointing out our flaws. And so we learned to do that with each other. And so my older siblings knew how to pick on me, and I got picked on a lot, made fun of. And so I grew up with that going on. So by the time I was 12 years old and had my first drink of alcohol, I was a mess on the inside, didn't even know it. I mean, I didn't have anything to compare it to, but I do know that when I drank for that first time, I felt peace, and I felt superhuman. I felt like I thought, this is how you're supposed to feel. I didn't know that feeling existed, and it was fantastic. And so I didn't set out to be an addict or a drunk, but I just knew that that's what made me feel good, and I wanted to feel good.
I can't imagine who wouldn't want to, okay?
Right.
I've often said, I understand where the addiction gets started and how it gets started. I don't agree with it. That's not important, quite honestly. But the idea, the pain that some go through, the trauma they deal with, I'd want a Band-Aid of some sort also. And if that brought comfort, I can see that happening. So where did it go from that 12-year-old range of the peacefulness of that drink and the calm it brought to your life? Where did that go next?
Yeah, so I just was around drugs and alcohol as much as I could be. So if there was a party going on, I found out about it and I would go. If there was somebody that had some drugs, I would find out who they were and get some. And so I was either using drugs or looking for drugs almost all the time, all the way through high school. My high school nickname was Woodstock. I had long hair and those glasses that never really cleared up that got dark in the sun, and so I looked like I always had sunglasses on, and I was a full stoner. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High, um, but there was a character named Spicoli who was stoner, and Sean Penn I think played him, and he was a pretty amusing character. But that was me in high school. I was Spicoli, and I was high as much as I could be.
Were you at that time at least satisfied with that role as Woodstock? Uh, or was it, were you in enough pain or
Yeah. Well,
discomfort?
I mean, I thought I didn't have um, I didn't have a normal childhood. I didn't have parents that set boundaries for me or made me do things that I used to feel sorry for other kids that had to do chores and be home at a certain time, and I just got to run free. I thought I was lucky, but it turns out it was not a good environment for a young person whose brain isn't fully formed to grow up in. And so I never learned some of the basics of life that most of us learn if we come from a halfway decent family. And so I was a bit of a wild child, but I enjoyed my reputation, and I thought I was popular, and I thought people thought I was cool, and so now, no, it didn't bother me.
So
Um,
you got some positive reinforcement out of that at that time.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was able to, I think it was due to the fact that I grew up in an army family, moving all the time. I learned how to adapt and how to fit in with all kinds of situations, and so I could go hang out with the athletes just as easily as I could the stoners, and but I didn't make any place my home. I would move around. I never set down roots anywhere. I never
You wouldn't
so
have had much of a chance with, I think you said 32 moves
yeah,
in 20 years.
yeah. But by the time my family settled down, I was in about the fourth grade. So it was my older siblings that experienced most of those moves. But I experienced enough of it where I was the new kid in class quite often, and but yeah, I just learned to be a chameleon, and I also know that's part of people who have this disease is they learn to adapt and adjust to their environment, and they become really adept at fitting in. Um,
You
or-
you just answered one of my next questions there when you called it a disease. I was going to ask you if you thought it was a choice, a disease, or otherwise.
well,
How would you describe that?
yeah, it's complex. I mean,
Oh,
I don't. I think that's why the industry and all of us are having a hard time putting our fingers on it because I don't know that we can point to any one causation. There's genetic factors, there's environmental factors, there's all kinds of things that play into it. So it really depends on what who you are and what you've experienced that has to do with it. But I believe a lot of it, a whole lot of it. I think underneath almost every addiction, there's pain that's being medicated. Gabor Mate writes about this, and he says we shouldn't be asking people what's wrong with you. We should be saying what happened to you, because it's a lot more compassionate, and it helps us to see this as these are broken people, and they're not bad people doing bad things. They're hurting people trying to feel better.
amen to
And
all of that. Yeah.
yeah, and
I
what happens is that you take this drug or whatever it is you're taking to feel better, and it works for a while. But in the meantime, it's reorganizing your brain cells. I mean, there's a real studies now that show that the pathology and the impacts on the brain are very real, and that the brain rewires itself, and the whole reward system of your brain starts to take over, and really you lose control. You lose your frontal cortex doesn't have the control that it normally does. It starts to lose that. And it's that lower brain function, the snake that lives in us, that starts making those decisions. And so you gradually get worse and worse at making good decisions.
We have had more than one guest who's talked about that
I'm sure.
need for the rewiring of the brain.
Yeah.
They had more eloquent words for it than I could
Yeah.
recall this time. But the idea of how we've just got to reteach ourselves,
Yeah.
go back to maybe beneath base one.
Yeah.
You know, that we've messed ourselves up enough through all of that. So for you, how long was the addiction active
Well,
between the drinking and the drug?
yeah. Well, with the substances, the drugs and alcohol, the disease was active until age 26, when I really kind of hit bottom. I was starting to inject cocaine into my veins, and really, I was broke all the time. I was homeless a few times. I'm just struggling to make life work. Couldn't figure it out. I had faith in God throughout all that time. I knew God was the answer to my problems, and I would call upon God all the time and say, how long before you rescue me, and I need your help. And when are you going to, why do I keep living like this when I don't want to? It's sort of like Paul's struggle. I keep doing the thing I hate, and the thing I want to do, I don't do. And
I love that piece
yeah,
of scripture, that line, because to me it so defines the struggle that goes with
yeah.
addiction. It's not because I want to, it's because it has control of
I
me.
have to. Yes, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was an unwilling participant in my own life. I had become a person I didn't personally approve of, but I couldn't seem to change anything.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like that was basically a 14-year battle along that. And I
Uh-huh.
know that those addictive behaviors, even if you stop the drug, you stop the alcohol, that they still manifest themselves
Yeah,
through other activities and our
yeah,
stinking thinking and
yeah.
all that goes with that.
Yes. Well, you had asked me, how long did the addictive behaviors last? And then I was about to say, well, what do you mean they've never stopped? I still struggle with, and I think it's because it's hardwired into all of us. I think we all struggle to some degree with what I call addiction, and I don't mean to say that being addicted to chocolate is the same as being addicted to opioids. But we all have that inner battle going on over the things that lines that we cross that we know we shouldn't, and we do it, and we debate in our heads. I think about when I go to McDonald's. I think, oh, I should get the salad. I shouldn't eat the fries. I should get the salad. And I debate about that all the way up until it's my turn, and then they say, "Do you want fries with that?" And I say, "Supersize it, supersize it." And so
Well, as you say that about the chocolates, it brings a chuckle to me because, as I have shared on here so often, I do not come from a background of addictions to drugs or alcohol.
Mhm.
Obviously, in our lives, we all have addictions of some sort, whether it's TV or
Yep.
regard or
Yeah.
phones or whatever
Yeah.
it may be. But I often say, unless you want to talk about my addiction to Reese Cups, Snickers, and love affair with Little Debbie, well, that brings
Yeah.
a chuckle. But I'm a
Yeah.
diabetic, and
Oh,
that certainly was not doing me any good.
right, right.
And that's an addiction I had to let go of, and I'd still arm wrestle you for a frozen Snicker. I no longer speak to Little Debbie, but the battle is
But
there.
little Debbie still talks to you, right?
Oh, she tries. Yeah, I best to turn my hearing aids off at that point, but it is what it is.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
yeah. So when was it? I heard you say at like 26 you hit bottom. Did you actually start your climb back up at that point?
Yeah. Well, toward the end, my brother went to treatment, and here's how I got in. And I tell this story because I think it's important. There's important lessons to learn from it. My brother went to treatment before I did, and I remember thinking, good, he needed help, even though I used and drank as much as he did. But I thought he had a problem. He went and got treatment, and then he came home and began to teach my mom about the disease and that it was a family disease and that we all played a part in it. And she went off to college and got an education and got a degree in counseling,
Hooray
substance
for
counseling.
her.
Yeah, yeah. After raising 8 kids and going back to college at a later age, and yeah, she was a remarkable woman. But she began to confront me. She'd been enabling me my whole life, but she learned how to deal with people with drinking problems. So she began to confront me at every chance she got in a loving way. But she would say things like, "I'm worried about you. How's your drinking?" And I would get so mad at that question. If you ask somebody with a problem how their drinking is, they'll get mad. That's how you can tell they have a problem, because people that don't have a problem don't get mad.
Don't have to lie.
They don't have to get mad. Yeah, they don't have to lie. And so she would ask me that, and I would get furious, and I didn't want to talk about it, and I pushed away from her. I stopped being around her because I knew she was going to ask me that, and I didn't want to hear it. And so she knew that, how hard that was for her to be saying things that push your own child away. That was hard for her, but at the same time, I thank God for her willingness to do that. Um, because when I finally hit bottom with it, that day that I had my last use, the morning I woke up with this terrible hangover, and I was in a strange place, starting my life over one more time, and I couldn't take it anymore. And I picked up that 10-pound phone receiver and I called home, and the minute she answered the phone, I started bawling my eyes out. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. I'm, and so she heard a lot of desperation in my voice. She said, well, let's get you home and get you into treatment. And I said, well, I really don't think that's my problem. I couldn't see it. You think about denial and how powerful it is. I could honestly not see that that was my problem. I knew that I drank and I used drugs too much, but I also knew that they were the solution to whatever was wrong with me. And so I felt like there's something wrong with me. If I could get that thing fixed, then I could use drugs like normal people do, right? I mean, that was the thinking, is that I could moderate. Um, and so I wasn't convinced I had a problem. And so she said, well, let's just get you home. We'll talk about it. And then my brother and my mom went off to an Al-Anon meeting and said, here's the situation. And they said, no, don't rescue him. Find him a treatment center and tell him that's what he needs. And so they called me back the next day and said, we found you a bed and there's a treatment center. And I'm like, oh, you're not going to come get me? And they said, no, you need to go to treatment. And I was really heartbroken, hung up the phone, and I had a long, hard debate about what do I do next. And I thought, well, what the hell? I got nothing to lose. I'll go in. I went in and told them that I wasn't sure I had a problem, but I was willing to explore it. And I watched videos and I read the big book, and it started to dawn on me. It's amazing how, with a little bit of knowledge, you start to see, put the pieces together. And I think our problem in society today is that we don't get knowledge about this disease until we have it. And if we were able to educate people at an earlier point, they maybe not have to go so far before they get the help they need.
How do we do that? Do you have a
Well,
suggestion for that?
well, that's what I'm pushing. I'm pushing faith communities to get educated, because I know people turn to the church for help, and I know the church is ignorant when it comes to this topic. And until they get this is the connection I'm making in the book that I'm writing right now, and that is when an addict has a problem, the addict is really the presenting patient of the family. In other words, the whole family's got a problem, and the addict is the one who presents as and so he shows the symptoms of the whole system. And they found that if you treat just the addict and don't deal with the family and put that addict back in that family, the chances of them succeeding are almost zero, because they have to treat the whole system. The whole system's broken. And so what I'm asserting is that, well, we have the worst drug problem in the world. The United States is by far the worst drug problem in the world. We have more overdose deaths. We spend more on drugs. We consume more drugs. We've got a serious addiction problem. That tells me it isn't just the addicts. It's all of us are playing a part in that. And it isn't just substances. It's consumerism. It's our attachment to plastic, and it's our attachment to all these things that we consume that are harmful, but we keep doing them. I mean, to me, that's the description of addiction, is to repeat the same things, expecting different results. And so we're killing ourselves and the world with our addictions. Global warming is an overconsumption of oil and products that cause global warming. Anyway, so don't get me started on all this.
All right, we'll keep you on this part of the talk.
Thank you. I
Hopefully,
appreciate
okay. Yeah. So, what is it about the church in general that keeps it from stepping up to the plate to truly look at, evaluate, to educate, to fulfill the role of the church that you and I probably both agree should be fulfilled?
Yeah.
What's keeping us from that?
Well, I think the Puritan movement, where the expectation was that if we're Christians, we behave in perfect ways, and
Yes.
it's not the teaching of the faith. It's not. It's a human construction, and what we need to do is say no. And that's what I love about the Bible and the Old Testament. The Israelites write their story, and they are not the heroes of that story. They don't look good in it at all, but it's the story they wrote about their past. And basically, they admit that they fail over and over, but God was faithful. Um, and so we get our theology wrong, and that you look at the Pharisees in the time of Jesus. They were responding to the exile. They came back from exile and said, we can't let that ever happen again, so we better get it right. So they started reading the law and trying to live by the law, and then they went off into that ditch, which wasn't what God wanted, and they became legalistic. And Jesus came along and said, that's not what God wants, and God cares about broken people, and you don't. And so why is that? And so often our churches end up in that kind of following that same path. This is we come together and we don't want anybody to see that we're hurting, so we put on our best face, we put on our best clothes and our best behavior, and act really good at church, but then we go home and get drunk and beat the kids. And so so the church has become a place where you perform, and you can't be yourself. And until the church figures out that it's supposed to be a place where you can talk about your brokenness. And I've had a couple of experiences like that. When I interviewed for my first call as a pastor, I told my story. And the guy that was chairing the committee said, oh, I didn't introduce everybody. Let's all go around and share. And they all began to share stories of struggle that they had gone through, cancer and a death of a loved one and a child that was struggling. And anyway, it turned into a little 12-step meeting. And I think that's a model for the church, is if people could have the permission to talk about where they're hurting, the church would be a much more powerful place.
I believe that with all my heart. When I first felt the leading of God to get involved with A Better Life, Brianna's Hope, the young lady in our community, Brianna, who our program is named after, had disappeared. Her body wasn't found for 10 weeks, and when it was, obviously she was deceased. So what do we do from here? How do we step it up? Long story short, after communication with her family and witnessing the number of people with alcohol and drug issues who attended her services, we knew something had to be done. And I can remember even before our first meeting, standing before the church I was pastoring, and I feel myself getting emotional here with this from that time. But standing there telling them, we're going to make a special effort to invite some folks in that God calls us to, whether we've done it before or not. These are broken people who are struggling, and in that why we're here. And I made it clear this Sunday we were going to make it a very concerted effort. If that's not for you, there's another church here in town that meets at 9 o'clock, another one that meets at 11. Maybe you should be going over there that day because we're going to do this. And it ended up being far more than we had expected. Several came back the following Sunday and remained with us. They maybe didn't understand all of our rules because
Yeah.
during testimony time, they'd share, they'd use some language we don't always hear in church. But you
Yeah.
know what? The people didn't. They didn't get whiplash from looking around to see who said it or
Yeah.
anything. We could accept them. And of
Yeah.
course, with Brianna's passing, we've been very close to that with personal involvement and church involvement. So that started us on a path of recognizing and realizing maybe we're not all we've claimed to be.
Well, so you've figured it out. I mean, that's good for you. That's amazing. What an inspiration that is to hear that.
In that moment, it was the kind of thing that what's there to lose? We're losing
Yeah.
people left and
Right.
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 This disease.
Right. No kidding. That's what I feel like is the church right now all over the place is struggling, and they've got to do something different.
And
They can't just yeah.
that's where my biggest hurt is, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
with the church and the way it's been. I can remember back when we started 11 years ago, it was the stigma, the bias of just put them all on a boat and ship them to an
Yeah.
island.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
got themselves into it, let them get themselves out.
Yeah.
What does stigma and bias look like back in the day when you were first awakening and realizing your addiction issues
Yeah.
and wanting to move forward? What was the battle?
Well, it kept me for the longest time from going to 12-step meetings, which is where I got well. And that's because I didn't want to be affiliated because that was where losers go. That's where that was the last house on the block. In fact, my brother invited me to a meeting and I didn't, I just said no. I didn't want to go there. He caught me in a moment of weakness and said, "I'm going to a meeting. You want to go?" I didn't realize he was trying to get me to. I thought he just wanted some support. I didn't know he was trying to fix me. But I had a moment of weakness and I said, "Sure, I'll go." And I went and I remember being terrified because I thought, what if I see somebody I know? How are they going to know I'm not one of these people? Because I didn't want to be one of those people. And I walked into this meeting hall and looked around the room, and it looked to me like the Star Wars bar, just some of the most beat up people you'd ever seen sitting around drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. And I just thought, what am I doing here? This isn't this. These are, I don't belong here. I'm this isn't for me. And then they began to share their stories. And I remember being very attracted to what they were saying because I thought, how are they doing this? They are speaking so genuinely, and they're so at peace with themselves, and they're laughing, and they're talking about all the stupid things they did, and they're laughing about it, and they're so comfortable talking in front of other people. I was absolutely terrified to speak in front of other people. It's because I had so much to hide. And so I couldn't figure out how they were doing it, and I was very attracted to it. But at the same time, believe it or not, my faith was what kept me out of recovery for the longest time because
Got that?
you get that because
Absolutely.
I looked around that room and I thought, well, these people just need Jesus like I have,
Yep.
and they were the ones getting well, and I was the one getting sick, and it was like, well, how does that work? Um, and I finally had to surrender and say, I guess this is where I belong, and it turns out it's the best place in the world.
Such a dichotomy of
Yeah,
feelings there.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
on the one hand, you've got this holiness, and on the other hand, you've got total brokenness.
yeah,
How does that
yeah.
possibly come together? Or how
Well, just a
did,
lot of denial. I mean,
yeah.
you have to not be willing to look seriously at how messed up you really are.
So what, maybe this is a good time to ask, what is the role that you see professionally? Before you answer that, tell the folks who you are today professionally, what you do, how you
Sure.
go about it, and then we'll go back to the question, how does faith play a role in recovery?
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, let's see. I was a parish pastor for 25 years. Once I got into treatment and got into recovery, I tried to figure out what to do with my life because I didn't want to do restaurant work, which was all I ever knew. And I decided to go back to school to avoid going into restaurant work. So my motivation for school was to avoid work, and uh, and to meet girls, of course. And so I went back to college and got a degree in journalism, and then was trying to figure out what to do. Throughout that time, I'd given up on the church. Did a lot of church shopping. I was looking for a church that could speak to my recovery, and there was never anything close. I would walk away disappointed every time. I would walk away thinking, what does this have to do with anything?
Let me interrupt. When was this?
This
What
was
year frame we talk?
1986 is
Okay,
when I
okay.
got into recovery.
Give,
And so the couple years after that, 86, 87, 88, I was church shopping. I finally gave up on the church. But then my senior year of college, I went with a friend. We were going to go out into the wilderness and find God. We were very spiritual. We just weren't religious. And we wandered into a place called Holden Village. I don't know if that name means anything to you, but it's an old mine, a copper mine in the middle of the Cascade Mountains that was abandoned. And the company that owned it sold it to the Lutherans, and they fixed it up as a retreat center for adults. And it's a really amazing place that people from all over the world, from different faith backgrounds, from different transitions, a lot of people in transition in life, but it's so isolated that it makes it something special about that. But I happened to wander in. I didn't even know the place existed, but we wandered in there looking for God, right? And we wandered into a Lutheran camp, and I didn't know anything about Lutherans. I was a little leery because I just thought, oh no, a bunch. See, I had thought to that point, to be a Christian, you had to put on a good face, and you had to not be struggling. I mean,
of course,
because
had been modeled for you everywhere you went.
yeah,
So who
right,
wouldn't think that?
right. So I just thought to be a Christian, it was phony happiness, and I thought I can't fake that. I got to be me, and that's where I could. That's what I was loved about the 12-step program is I could just be me. I could drop f-bombs and I didn't get judged or kicked out, and so I came into Holden. Well, the weekend that I wandered into Holden, they were doing a special weekend on the 12 steps.
Hmm. I hear
Hmm.
somebody at work, other than you and me. Okay.
Well, we were looking for God, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it just is amazing how God works. So, this was my return to the church. It was like coming home. It was like, these are my people. I like these Lutherans. They're all right. So I volunteered there that summer, and I became kind of an active member of the Lutheran Church. And it was there I decided to go to seminary. So I went off to seminary thinking that all the Lutherans were like these people at Holden Village. But after about 3 months at seminary, I came home and said, I've made a huge mistake. I said, this church is no different than any other. I mean, it's just, they're not talking about any of this stuff recovery, brokenness, and when I try to bring it up, they poo-poo me. They kind of push me off to the side because they don't want to get into that. So I was just really having a hard time with that, thinking, do I quit? Do I walk out? What do I do? And I, about that time, heard about a group of pastors getting together in Chicago that were in recovery from alcohol. And I said, I got to go there. So I went there and met these pastors, and they were recovering drunks, like you'd find in any 12-step meeting. And I thought, these are my people. This is my tribe. And I thought, I guess I could be a pastor in recovery. And so that gave me the inspiration to see it through. And then we formed a fellowship called the Fellowship of Recovering Lutheran Clergy. And I've been the director of that for the last 18 years. And what we do in that ministry is try to help pastors in recovery, because church is not real nice to pastors when they have this problem. We have a saying: the church shoots its wounded. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, pastors get hardly any compassion around this. Congregations treat them badly. The church leadership treats them badly. There's just a lot of stigma and shame around it still. It's getting better, but it's far from there yet.
Has a long way.
Long way to go. So we formed this fellowship so that we could let newly recovering pastors know they're not alone, and that there's hope and there's life after death, and that there's a way to pick them up. But then in 2016, with the growing opioid crisis, I heard an impassioned plea by Senator Amy Klobuchar saying, this addiction problem is out of hand. Everything we're doing is making it worse. We don't know what to do next. We need everyone to realize this is all of our problem. And I just had this vision in that moment that I thought, there's a church on every street corner in this country. And if they all started doing something about addiction, we might be able to make a dent. And so I got the idea to hold a conference and try to educate, because I know at seminary they didn't teach anything about this. And I've since learned at medical school they don't learn about it either. And that's why I said there's a lot of ignorance out there. Even our medical professionals don't understand addiction and how it works. They're starting to, but there's still a long way to go. They still think of people that are drug seeking as dirty addicts instead of people that need to be evaluated and referred. And so we still haven't accepted that this is a health issue. And we still throw people in jail for having a health issue. Which is about the worst thing you can do to them, because once you go to jail, your chances of recovery go way down. You do prison ministry, you know that really puts them up against the wall once they're incarcerated. And once they're released, they're at a very high risk of overdose, because their bodies have not adjusted to some of the
Exactly.
synthetic fentanyl that's out there. So they're dying. They're a disproportionate number of those people that are dying from overdose are people who came out of incarceration. So yeah, that's why I say we've got to educate ourselves about this so that we know what we're dealing with, because right now we're all over the map with it.
So you've explained that to us. Is the book you're working on now, is it of this kind of theme? Is it otherwise? What's it about? How do we get our hands on it, Pastor
Yeah.
Ed?
Well, I got to finish writing it. I've written it. I'm got to finish editing it. It's still got problems, and I'm ironing those out. I'm waiting to hear back from a publishing house to see if they'll pick it up or not. It's really hard to get published these days because nobody's buying books. And so they're having to be very selective. So hopefully it'll be picked up. If not, then I will self-publish, and that should be available in the next. If I self-publish, it'll be ready in a matter of months. If it's a publishing house, it'll probably be a year and a half before it's out, just because they take forever.
Sure. So
Yeah.
I mentioned in the intro that you're a hunter in the sense of that elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Give us a brief idea of what that means. I feel like I've got a good hold on that, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah.
How do we recognize the elephant? How do we bring it down?
Well, it isn't the elephant. So the title of the book is the lie that kills us. And what I'm talking about there is the whole book is about denial. And it's denial is what kills us. It isn't that we did something wrong. It's that we deny we did something wrong. And that begins in the garden when Adam gets confronted with by God. His first reaction is to say, I didn't do it. It was your fault. It was her fault. It was the snake's fault. Deflection and blame. And so that's hardwired into us. We're all that way. So we all have this problem to some degree. It's just addicts have it worse because their brain gets messed up from the drug use. And so that's the lie that kills us, is our denial. And what I found is that when I got through my denial as an addict and got into treatment, I saw the elephant. I thought, oh, that's what's been stomping through my life and destroying everything. That's the elephant. What what's been amazing is that 30 years later in recovery, I realize I still have elephants. I still have things that I'm not willing to look at and that I deny, even though it's causing me problems. And for me, that's been my childhood trauma and the stuff I went through as a child. And that started to rear its head. And I went, it's amazing the impact that's had on my life. And I've just been uncovering that, but that's another elephant to deal with. So we all have elephants of different size and shapes, but they're there for all of us. And so that's what I'm trying to point out. But there's another layer to the elephant metaphor. And that first one is that thing that we don't see that's causing us problems. That's the first way to see it. The other one is there's a parable about an elephant, a baby elephant that's staked to the ground, and it can only travel in a circle. And as it grows, it gets bigger and bigger. It could easily get away. It could easily pull the stake out, but because it got used to traveling in that little circle, and those things that entrap us, that we deny, we really do have the strength and the size to break away from it. We just have gotten so used to it, and we're afraid. We're afraid of what the unknown. Richard Rohr talks about that. Father Rohr, he says that we would rather stay with the familiar than the unknown, even if the familiar is causing us misery.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's scary out there. We think we've at least got a recognition of what's going on, when of course we don't, but we have that comfort in our mind. Listen, Pastor Ed, wow, thank you. This time's gone quickly.
That has.
I
I feel
appreciate
like we're just getting warmed up.
appreciate your wisdom, your knowledge, all that you've shared with us. I'm sure one of these days we'll get back to you and we'll go with track
love that.
number 2 here.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Hope
Yes.
that will work for you. But until then, as I said, what you've offered us is good food for thought. And I hope we can all start to get that elephant out of the room. We've got to be honest with ourselves. You made that clear. It's not did we do right or wrong. It's how do we deal with where we're at and take that next best step. And I'm sure you and I agree it's through God and Christ.
And community.
And
we can't
community.
neglect community because I can't see my elephants, but you can see them.
And
So
we
I need you to tell me what they are. Yeah.
I need somebody to keep me accountable. I need somebody who loves me enough to be honest with me and say that instead of enabling me to go on and miss that. All right. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in. You've seen our QR code. If you want to support us, we welcome that. We ask that you at least like and subscribe. And hey, we're going to be back here next week with another guest. We look forward to having you with us. God bless, and as always, stay in the battle. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.